What happens when one of the most respected actors in the world sits down for what should be a simple talk show interview, only to be blindsided by a host who crosses every line imaginable? In just 34 seconds, Denise Welch's smugness would shatter into humiliation as Ian McKellen delivered a verbal masterclass that left the entire panel speechless and the studio audience erupting. This is the story of how one of Britain's most beloved actors reached his breaking point on live television. The Loose Women studio was buzzing with its usual energy. The panel was set. Denise Welch sat in her usual commanding position, flanked by Janet Street Porter, Carol McGiffin, and Sherry Hewson. They were all smiles as they prepared to welcome their special guest, Sir Ian McKellen. The legendary actor, known for his roles in everything from Shakespeare to Gandalf, was there to promote his latest theater production. It should have been straightforward. It should have been pleasant. It was anything but. Ian walked onto the set to thunderous applause from the audience. He smiled warmly, waving to the crowd, his presence immediately elevating the atmosphere. He took his seat next to Denise, who greeted him with what seemed like warmth, but had an edge that those who knew her recognized instantly. "Ian, welcome. Welcome," Denise said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that felt just a touch too performative. "We're so thrilled to have you here. I mean, it's not every day we get actual royalty on this show." The audience laughed. Ian smiled politely, nodding his appreciation. "Well, I'm hardly royalty, but thank you for having me." Janet Street Porter leaned forward, her distinctive voice cutting through. "Ian, you've been doing this for how long now? 60 years? 70 years? You must be exhausted." There it was, the first little jab. Ian handled it with grace. "Well, Janet, when you love what you do, it never feels like work. I'm fortunate to still be doing what I'm passionate about." Carol McGiffin chimed in next. "Yes, but don't you think there comes a time when, you should make way for younger talent? I mean, how many times can you play the same roles?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the usual playful banter. This felt pointed. Ian's smile remained, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Confusion, perhaps, or the first spark of irritation. "I don't think passion has an expiration date, Carol," Ian replied, his voice measured. "And I'd argue that experience brings depth to performance that youth alone cannot provide." Denise jumped back in, clearly steering the conversation in a direction she'd planned. Right. But let's talk about something everyone's been curious about. Ian, you've been very vocal about certain political issues, very outspoken about your beliefs. Don't you think that as an actor, you should just stick to acting and leave the politics to politicians?" The studio went quiet. This was the moment. This was where Denise showed her hand. She wasn't here to have a pleasant chat. She was here to provoke, to create a moment, to get a reaction. Ian paused. He looked at Denise directly, his expression shifting from polite to serious. "I think, Denise, that being an actor doesn't strip me of my right to be a citizen. We all have a voice. We all have a responsibility to speak up about things that matter." Denise laughed, but it was hollow. "Oh, here we go. Another celebrity thinking they know better than the rest of us. You live in a bubble, Ian. You have no idea what real people go through." Sherry Hewson looked alarmed, glancing between Denise and Ian. "Denise, I don't think that's quite fair." "No, Sherry, let me finish," Denise snapped, not even looking at her colleague. She kept her eyes locked on Ian. "You sit in your fancy theater, performing for elites who can afford 100-pound tickets, and then you lecture the rest of us about morality and politics. It's rich, really." The audience was stunned. Some people gasped. Others sat frozen, unsure if this was part of the show or if they were witnessing something genuine and uncomfortable. Ian's jaw tightened. His voice, when he spoke, was calm but firm. "Denise, I think you're confusing having a platform with being out of touch. I've worked my entire life. I came from nothing. I've earned everything I have, and I use my voice because I can, not because I think I'm better than anyone. Janet Street Porter sensed blood in the water and decided to pile on. But Ian, you do realize how you come across, don't you? All this knighthood business, all this superiority. It's a bit much. Ian turned to Janet, his patience visibly thinning. I didn't give myself a knighthood, Janet. That's not how it works. And I've never once claimed superiority over anyone. What I do claim is the right to speak my mind, just as you're speaking yours right now. Carol McGiffin wasn't done either. Yes, but when you speak your mind, Ian, you expect everyone to fall in line. You expect us all to just agree with you because you're Ian McKellen. It's exhausting, honestly. Now all three of them were circling, and Denise was smiling. She thought she had him cornered. She thought this was going exactly as she'd planned. Ladies, Ian said, his voice rising just slightly, I came here today to talk about theater, to talk about art, to share something I love with people who might be interested. I didn't come here to be ambushed by a panel who clearly decided before I even walked through that door that they were going to tear me down. Denise leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, that smug smile still plastered on her face. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Ian. We're just having a conversation. If you can't handle a little pushback, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. That was it. That was the line. Ian stood up. The audience gasped. Collectively, Sherry Hewson's hand went to her mouth. Carol and Janet exchanged glances, suddenly realizing this had gone too far. But Denise just sat there, still smiling, still thinking she was in control. A conversation, Ian repeated, his voice cutting through the studio like a blade. This isn't a conversation, Denise. A conversation requires respect. It requires listening. What you've done here today is invite me onto your show under false pretenses, so you could belittle me, mock my career, and dismiss my right to have opinions. Denise's smile faltered. Just a fraction. Ian, sit down. You're overreacting. No, Ian said firmly. I'm not, and I won't sit here and be disrespected by someone who clearly has no interest in genuine dialogue. You wanted a moment, Denise. You wanted drama. Congratulations. You've got it. The audience was on the edge of their seats. Some people started clapping, unsure if they should, but unable to contain their support for Ian. Sherry tried to intervene. Ian, please, let's just take a breath. And Ian turned to Sherry, his expression softening. Sherry, you're lovely. You've been nothing but kind. But I can't stay here. I won't be treated this way. Janet Street Porter, clearly uncomfortable now, tried to backtrack. Look, Ian, maybe we came on a bit strong, but... A bit strong? Ian interrupted, his voice incredulous. Janet, you questioned my entire career. You suggested I should step aside for younger people. Carol, you implied I'm irrelevant. And Denise, you called me out of touch, accused me of living in a bubble, and then had the audacity to tell me I'm being dramatic when I object to being attacked. Denise finally stood up, her face reddening. Attacked? Oh, please, Ian. You're not a victim here. You're just upset because for once, someone didn't bow down to you. The studio fell silent. Everyone was watching, waiting. Ian looked at Denise with something between pity and contempt. You know what, Denise? I actually feel sorry for you. You're so desperate for relevance, so desperate to create controversy, that you'll sacrifice basic decency to get it. You invited me here not to celebrate art or theater or anything meaningful. You invited me here to make yourself feel important by tearing someone else down. Denise's mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time, she had nothing to say. Carol tried to jump in. Ian, that's not fair. We're just doing our jobs. Ian turned to her sharply. Your job is to interview guests, not ambush them. Your job is to create interesting television, not hostile environments. And if you think what happened here today was good television, then I truly worry about the state of broadcasting. Janet Street Porter, clearly flustered, attempted damage control. All right, let's all calm down. We obviously hit a nerve, and maybe we should... Hit a nerve? Ian's voice rose. You didn't hit a nerve, Janet. You revealed exactly who you are. All of you. You sit here day after day, judging others, commenting on their lives, their choices, their careers, and you do it with such confidence, such certainty. But the moment someone pushes back, the moment someone refuses to play along with your game, you act shocked. Sherry Hewson was nearly in tears. Ian, I'm so sorry. I didn't want this to happen. Ian's expression softened when he looked at Sherry. I know you didn't, Sherry. You're not like them. But you need to ask yourself if this is really where you want to be, surrounded by people who treat guests this way. Denise had recovered somewhat, her defensiveness kicking in. You're being incredibly rude, Ian. We welcomed you onto our show, and this is how you repay us? Ian laughed, but there was no humor in it. Welcomed me? Denise, you ambushed me. There's a difference. And as for being rude, I'm simply matching the energy you brought to this conversation. You want to dish it out, but you can't take it. The audience started clapping again, louder this time. Some people stood up. The support for Ian was palpable, and it was clearly making Denise angrier. Sit down, Denise shouted at the audience. This is our show. But they didn't sit down. They kept clapping. Some even started cheering. Ian watched this unfold and shook his head. Do you see this, Denise? This is what happens when you underestimate people. You thought your audience would be on your side. You thought they'd enjoy watching you tear me down. But they're not. They're not because they recognize bullying when they see it. Carol McGiffin stood up now too, clearly agitated. Bullying? Are you serious? We asked you some tough questions. That's not bullying. Tough questions, Ian repeated. Carol, there's a difference between tough questions and personal attacks. You didn't ask me about my craft. You didn't ask me about my process. You asked me why I haven't retired. You questioned my relevance. You mocked my knighthood. Those aren't tough questions. Those are insults disguised as journalism. Janet Street Porter tried one more time. Ian, you're a public figure. You have to expect this kind of scrutiny. Ian turned to her, his voice deadly calm. Janet, I've been a public figure for decades. I've faced scrutiny. I've faced criticism. I've faced genuine tough questions from real journalists. What I faced today wasn't scrutiny. It was mean-spirited, calculated disrespect, and I won't stand for it. Denise was fully on the defensive now, her voice shrill. Fine, leave then. Walk off. Prove everyone right that you can't handle real conversation. Ian picked up his jacket from the back of his chair. I'm not proving anyone right, Denise. I'm proving that I have self-respect. Something you might want to look into. The audience erupted. The applause was deafening now. People were on their feet, cheering for Ian as he prepared to leave. Sherry Hewson reached out. Ian, please. He took her hand gently. Sherry, you're too good for this. Remember that. Then he turned to face the panel one last time. Ladies, I came here today in good faith. I came here to share something I love, to connect with an audience, to have a pleasant conversation. Instead, I was met with hostility, condescension, and outright rudeness. I've been in this industry long enough to know when I'm being set up, and I'm certainly experienced enough to know when to walk away. Denise stood with her arms crossed, her face a mask of fury and embarrassment. You're making a huge mistake, Ian. This will follow you. Ian smiled, genuinely smiled, for the first time since the confrontation began. No, Denise, this will follow you. People will remember this. They'll remember how you treated a guest. They'll remember your arrogance, your cruelty, your complete lack of professionalism. And they'll remember that when given the choice between dignity and drama, you chose drama every single time. He started walking toward the exit. The audience was still on their feet, still applauding. Some were calling out words of support. "We love you, Ian." "You tell them." "Good for you," Janet Street Porter called after him. "Ian, you're overreacting. Come back, and let's talk about this properly." Ian stopped, turned slightly, but didn't come back. "Janet, there's nothing more to talk about. You've all shown me exactly who you are. I believe you." Carol McGiffen's voice was desperate now. "This is ridiculous. You can't just walk off a live show." Ian continued toward the door. "Watch me." Denise made one final attempt, her voice cracking slightly. "You think you're so much better than us, don't you?" Ian paused at the edge of the set, his hand on the studio door. He looked back at the panel, at Denise in particular, and his voice when he spoke was quiet, but powerful. "No, Denise, I don't think I'm better than you. I just know I deserve better than this. And so does your audience." And with that, he pushed through the door and was gone. The studio was in chaos. The audience was still applauding, still standing. Sherry Hewson had tears streaming down her face. Carol McGiffen looked shell-shocked. Janet Street Porter was frantically trying to signal the producers, and Denise Welch stood in the center of it all, her face pale, her smugness completely evaporated, replaced by the dawning realization of what had just happened. One of the producers came running onto the set, whispering urgently to Denise. She nodded numbly, then turned to the cameras, trying to compose herself. "Well," she said, her voice shaky, "that was unexpected." The audience booed. Actually booed. Denise flinched at the sound. Janet tried to salvage something. Look, clearly there were some strong feelings there. Sometimes interviews get heated, and more boos. The audience wasn't having it. Carol McGiffen looked directly at the camera. "We'll be right back after this break." But the damage was done. The cameras kept rolling for a few more seconds, capturing Denise slumping into her chair, her head in her hands, capturing Janet and Carol exchanging worried glances, capturing Sherry wiping tears from her eyes, capturing an audience that had completely turned against the panel. In those final moments before the break, you could hear someone in the audience shout, "You should be ashamed of yourselves." And the applause that followed that statement told you everything you needed to know about who had won this confrontation. It wasn't even close. Ian McKellen had walked onto that set as a respected actor and had left as something more. A man who refused to be diminished. A man who stood up for himself when cornered. A man who knew his worth and wouldn't let anyone take it from him. And Denise Welch, who had started the show thinking she was in control, thinking she could create a moment at Ian's expense, had instead created a moment that revealed everything about herself. Her need for drama. Her willingness to sacrifice decency for ratings. Her complete miscalculation of both her guest and her audience. The whole thing had lasted less than 15 minutes. 15 minutes that felt like an eternity. 15 minutes that would be replayed and discussed and analyzed for years to come. Because this wasn't just a celebrity walking off a talk show. This was a masterclass in dignity. This was what happened when someone pushed too far and faced consequences. This was the moment when Denise Welch learned that not everyone would play her game. Back in the studio, as they went to commercial, you could hear Denise's voice, small and defeated. "What just happened?" Sherry answered, her voice thick with emotion. "You pushed too far, Denise. You always push too far." Janet tried to defend her. He was being oversensitive. We were just doing what we always do. But Carol cut her off. What we always do just cost us one of the most respected actors in the country. What we always do just made us look like bullies on live television. What we always do just blew up in our faces. The silence that followed was deafening. In the green room, Ian McKellen was gathering his things. A production assistant approached him nervously. "Sir Ian, I just want to say what you did out there, that took incredible courage." Ian smiled at the young woman. "Thank you, dear, but it wasn't courage. It was simply self-respect. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of who they are or what they do." Another staff member approached. "I'm so sorry about what happened. We didn't know they were going to go after you like that." Ian nodded. "I believe you, but someone in your organization thought it was acceptable. Someone thought ambushing a guest would make for good television. I hope this teaches them otherwise." As he left the building, Ian could hear the muffled sounds of the show attempting to continue. He could imagine Denise trying to regain control, trying to spin what had happened, trying to make herself the victim. But he knew the truth, and more importantly, the audience knew the truth. They had seen it with their own eyes. They had watched a panel of hosts gang up on a guest, mock him, belittle him, and then act shocked when he refused to accept it. There was no coming back from that. No amount of spin could change what people had witnessed. The confrontation had exposed something ugly. Not about Ian McKellen, who had maintained his composure even in anger, who had articulated his points clearly and powerfully, who had stood up for himself without stooping to their level. No, it had exposed something ugly about loose women, about the culture of the show, about what they were willing to do for ratings, about how they treated people they deemed acceptable targets. And audiences don't forget that kind of thing. They don't forget watching someone they admire and respect being ganged up on. They don't forget the look on Denise Welch's face when her plan backfired. They don't forget the moment when the victim became the victor, simply by refusing to play along. In living rooms across the country, people were calling friends, posting on social media, discussing what they'd just witnessed. The consensus was overwhelming. Ian McKellen had been set up. Ian McKellen had been disrespected. And Ian McKellen had handled it with more grace and dignity than the entire panel combined. This wasn't a story about a celebrity throwing a tantrum. This wasn't a story about someone who couldn't handle criticism. This was a story about boundaries, about respect, about knowing when to walk away from people who don't value you. Ian McKellen had taught a masterclass that day, not in acting, not in theater, but in self-worth, and Denise Welch, Janet Street Porter, and Carol McGiffin had learned a valuable lesson. You can't bully someone into submission when they know their value. You can't gang up on someone and expect them to just take it. And you certainly can't underestimate the intelligence and decency of your audience. They had tried to make Ian McKellen look bad. They had tried to rattle him, to get him to lose his composure, to create a moment they could use for promotional clips. Instead, they had created a moment that would define them for all the wrong reasons. A moment that showed exactly who they were when the cameras were rolling and the guest wouldn't play along. And in that moment, in those 34 seconds when Ian McKellen stood up and refused to accept their treatment, everything changed. The power shifted. The narrative flipped. The hunted became the hunter. Denise Welch had started that interview thinking she was in control. She ended it humiliated, exposed, and facing an audience that had completely turned against her. All because she underestimated the man sitting across from her. All because she thought her platform gave her the right to be cruel. All because she forgot that dignity, once claimed, cannot be taken away. Ian McKellen walked off that set with his head held high, and Denise Welch was left sitting in the wreckage of her own making, finally understanding that some people simply won't be diminished, no matter how hard you try.